Okay, so I wanted to talk about cults. And one of the reasons why I used the word cult in my last video. The word cult is not it's not a clinical term. It's more of a common term. It's what they call vulgar term. So it's not an academic term. So the academic term would be like high demand group, or if you were talking about an individual person, they said that this is a high demand personality or something like that, or narcissistic personality. But the word cult is just something that people throw around as almost not necessarily an insult, but it's a descriptive word, and I use it as a descriptive word that has definitions. And for me, I follow Stephen Hassan's definition of the word cult, which is he follows something called the BITE model, which is it's the acronym BITE, which is behavior control, information control, thought control, and E is emotional control. So whenever you're in an environment that you have a group of people or an individual controlling, making these controls in your life, and they use these controls through manipulation. The doctors would call it mind control. It's actually a thing. Hassan calls it mind control, and people fall into mind control all the time. It's a thing that people get into, and it's undue influence. So it's not influence that you wish to have, it's influence that a rational person of you in the past would not do, or you would not want yourself influenced like this. So cults use undue influence to control your mind, and they use mind control, manipulation tactics. And Anchor Baptist Church falls into this category of a organization, and George Bell falls into the category of what I would call a cult leader, because he uses Hassan's tactics for mind control. And if you just look at like his behavior, I have some stuff written down for behavior. Controls types of clothing and hairstyle. And what IFB church doesn't control your clothing or hairstyle? Financial exploitation, manipulation, and deprivation of sleep. This happened to me. I was financially exploited. I would go all weekend without sleeping because you had to go to church. You just had to. I had to go to work, to make money to survive. Did I have to go to church? No, not necessarily. Except for if I didn't, what would happen? Well, shame, guilt, privileges would be taken away, that kind of thing. So, those are just the things where you're like, well, but can't I just skip this week because I need to sleep, because I have to work Saturday and Sunday? Well, no, you should be here. You should be here whenever the doors are open. You're too busy. I was told, well, you're too busy outside the church. If you're not here, if you don't have enough time for church, you're too busy. Well, the problem is that, when you work, 40 or 50 hours a week, let's say a person works, I worked 50 hours a week. I don't think I've ever worked, unless I took a vacation or a personal day, I've never worked less than 45 hours a week, since, it's just America. I mean, if you work 40 or less, you're going to be poor. You're not going to rank up in your company or whatever like that. Either that, or you're a skilled worker of some type. and I'm not. So, but so I would work, the normal 50, and sleep was secondary, third, really. So yeah, church was first, work was second, sleep was third. And so maybe over the weekend, I would get like 2 hours of sleep. And so that's behavioral manipulation, because if I didn't show up, then there would be manipulation tactics used. So you'd have to listen to the preaching, and it was, hey, show up to church, give your money, that kind of thing. Even if you can't afford it, give your money. So, and the idea is that, if you give your money, then God will bless you, so that then you'll have more money, which just, in 7-8 years I went there, that just didn't happen. It was always, I always had less money. So, so you have these behavioral manipulations. Hassan's 17th point of 25 in behavior manipulation is stuff like corporal punishment. And corporal punishment is, you think, well, gee whiz, Steve, were you ever like put in a cage or beat or anything like that? No, but I did see corporal punishment used. It's just used by, by the parents on the children. Every person that goes to Anchor Baptist Church is encouraged to beat their children. It's not even like they don't even hide it. And they call it spanking. The Bible calls it beating. So are you a Bible believer or not? Are you going to use the term? I mean, look it up. There's the word spank is not in the King James Bible, but the word beat is, and the word is beat. It's not spank. So, are you a Bible believer or are you not? It's one of those things where what they do is they temper the word beat, and they call it spank, to make it more palatable, and then eventually, as you rank up through the, and you become more and more indoctrinated, you become, yeah, I beat my kids. Yeah, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? I mean, gee whiz. So, and it's very, very common. There was, I saw it while the preaching was happening. There was a guy, who I sat behind one time, and he would flick his kids' ears, and he would shove them off the seat, and he would pinch them, and he would hit them while the preaching was going on. Why? Because his little 5-year-old or 4-year-old or whatever he wasn't paying attention to the preaching. I mean, come on, you're 4 years old. Can't you sit there for an hour and a half while the preaching's going on? Gee whiz. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and I saw it. Even my dad mentioned it to me, the same guy, actually. But I did see it with other people too. And my dad was very angry with him. Very, very angry. Never scolded him or said anything to him or anything like that, which is because if you did, well, he's just doing what he's supposed to do. The thing is, it was like, are you part of this church where you're going to scold somebody for disciplining their child? Because, I would call that an undisciplined parent, but they would call it disciplining the child. So there is, that's behavior control. If you're an adult indoctrinating your child into this cult, you have to use physical punishment. And children naturally do not want to be indoctrinated into cults. They just want to think for themselves. They don't want to be manipulated. But they will, they're emotional creatures, but they just want to go have fun. They want to play. They want to live life. Anyway. So then Hassan's other point is information control. So you've got deliberately withholding information. This was actually done to me specifically and to others. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, radio, TV, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media, all that stuff. Well, I mean, it's a big thing in the IFB movement to not watch television or go to the movies. Why do you think that is? No movies. None. Not even, well, I remember when Frozen came out, and it was a big thing. We're not going to go see Frozen. Gee whiz. What's wrong with Frozen? I mean, Disney movies, it's about as vanilla as apple pie. And it's like, oh no, you can't go to those things, and all these people would do it undercover. It's just, well, you never tell the preacher about it. Everybody had a TV. I remember the first, that I went to one of the preacher's daughter's house, and for a Sunday school get together. And it's one of the things I noticed was they didn't have a television in their living room, and I was like, oh, okay, well that's just part of the thing. They don't have a TV or whatever. But then you listen to the preaching, and it's like, okay, you don't watch TV, you don't listen to NPR, you don't listen to secular music, that kind of thing. You hardly listen to Rush Limbaugh, that kind of thing. So it's one of those things where there is information control. So point number 17 in Hassan's information control is report deviant thoughts and feelings and actions to leadership. You were always told, if you got a problem, why don't you come talk to me about it? Well, the reason why we don't come talk to you about it is because you're going to use manipulation tactics to cover up the problem. It's not like, hey, dude, I think we need to vacuum the carpet more. It's, hey, you've got this doctrinal error. I don't like beating children. I don't like being told what to wear, my clothing, that kind of thing. Because I'm an adult. Adults should be able to wear clothes that they want to wear. They're not robots that will just run around naked if you let them run around naked. I mean, there's lack of trust is what it is. So you got to have this code. And then let's see, manipulation of manipulation of memory, false memories, false thoughts, and stuff like that. That's what that's called is gaslighting, and that was routine, absolutely routine. And so there's a reason why I use the word cult. You have emotional control. Big one is promotes feelings of guilt and unworthiness. There was one time, one of the people that we were, and Mariah talks about this, one of the people that she was the deacon's wife. She said to Mariah, hey, God will never use guilt to correct you or to get you to do something. And then we were at their house before, it was sometime before, it was like that week though. I think it might have been that morning, or it was sometime that week. But then literally the next preaching service, the preacher said, oh, if I have to use guilt to get you to do what I want you to do, I'll use guilt to get you to do what I want you to do. Or if I have to use guilt to get you to do what God wants you to do. They're interchangeable, of course. What the preacher wants you to do and what God wants you to do, they're the same, obviously. So there are these things, thought, under thought control, rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism, forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, policy. It's just not allowed. That's one of the things is like, when you go to Anchor Baptist Church, you can be upset with God all you want and Jesus. It's like, oh God, why did you do this to me? But don't question the preacher. I mean, when I'm having, when I first left there, I said, hey, I really think that George Bell is teaching the Bible incorrectly. And, I talked to my dad about it, and I was like, hey, I really think that this is wrong. And it was like, I called him some type of heretic or something. I said, oh, I mentioned it to my dad. I was like, yeah, you have to be really careful when you use the word heretic, because you don't want to call somebody a heretic. And I was like, I would be called a heretic. According to Pastor Bell, I should be called a heretic for believing what the Bible's teaching about this. And he thought that, my dad thought that I was calling Pastor Bell a heretic. And man, that caused problems. but it's because they jumped to conclusions. They weren't actually thinking about what I was saying. I was like, anyway, so it caused problems. But if I was to say, well, I think God's wrong, okay, you can think God's wrong all you want. Well, I think the preacher's wrong. Ooh, now there's some problems. There's some strong words there. Calling the man of God, saying that he's wrong. he's just the same man as I am. I mean, that's the cult. That if you can't look at another person and say, well, they're equal, you're in a cult. They're equal. That's the thing, is there's nobody who is above or below, really. I mean, in the Bible, every Christian is a priest. Well, who do we we're supposed to be beholden to God, to Jesus Christ, not to another man. And so that's where you have the cult. And obviously, they'll deny it and manipulate it and change it, but that really is what it is. And so that's why I use the word cult. The IFB movement is a Bible cult. And then inside of that, you have Anchor Baptist Church, which is a personality cult. And it's a personality cult inside of a Bible cult. So now, this begs the question. It's like, well, are they drinking Kool-Aid or Tang or whatever they use down in Guyana to kill themselves? No, they're not doing that. Are they killing people? Well, Anchor Baptist Church isn't killing people. The doctrines of the IFB movement have killed innocent children, because they use corporal punishment on their children, and children have died. There's a passage in, I think it's in Proverbs, maybe, I'm not sure, but there's a passage that says, well, the child will not die. If you hit the child, you beat the child will not die. Children will die if you beat them hard enough. There's you might want to spiritualize that just a bit more. There are other parts of the Bible they'll spiritualize, but not that one. No, you beat the child as much as you want, they still won't die. Well, David Hiles learned that. He beat his child to death. So you have those things where it's like, no, you need to spiritualize that a little bit more. Okay, so are they dangerous? No, not really. Anchor Baptist Church is not like dangerous. They're not going to raise up an army of soldiers or anything like that. That's not going to happen. So the thing is like, are they destructive? Well, yeah, they're destructive to a certain degree. They're not extremely destructive. There's more destructive churches. There's more destructive cults. They do have a little, they allow some free thought, as long as you're within certain boundaries, which any organization allows. Any organization has boundaries, but their boundaries are just so strict that it gets into this cult level where you're authoritarian, that kind of thing. It's not rational boundaries. They're irrational boundaries. You have these traditions that you follow because of the hippies, so it's like long hair, you got to shave, you can't wear colored shirts. Well, why is that? Well, it's a reaction to the 1970s, 1960s hippie movement, where you had hippies who were, rebelling against the greatest generation. So you had the baby boomers rebelling against the previous generation. And so a reaction to that was to don't wear colored shirts, don't have facial hair, don't have long hair. Well, if you take a look at like Charles Spurgeon, I mean, luckily we have pictures of the man. He's quoted several times by George Bell. I even told George Bell, I was like, oh, because he said, oh yeah, the beard's getting pretty long. I was like, oh, just getting my Spurgeon on. I mean, long hair and long beard. And in the IFB movement, there was one time I heard a preacher say that Because if you point out to them, well, Jesus had the hair of his beard ripped out, and they'll say, oh yeah, well that's because they were trying to the Pharisees were so mean to Jesus because they wouldn't let him shave. And I'm like, they had him for 4 hours. How much hair would grow in 4 hours? Or they had him for a day. Let's say they had him for 24 hours before they killed him. I mean, they took him at night and they hung him on a cross the next day. How long is it gonna? I mean, this is several weeks worth of growth, months really. So it's like, well, how hairy was Jesus? And the fact of the matter is everybody in the Middle East had a beard, and beards were just not a thing because of World War II and World War One, to be honest, where people had to fit gas masks on their face. In World War One, if you had hair, the gas mask wouldn't fit to your face. So if they went out of style, because everybody went through the war and they all had to wear gas masks, and so they all shaved, and it became Army regulation and Navy regulation, and there you go. Well, and then if you join the military, they make you shave. They make you shave every day, sometimes twice a day. There are people with a lot of hair where they make you shave. They make you cut your hair. It's a military haircut. Why is that? For standardization. One, for standardization. Two, for, because of safety. In all reality, you get your hair caught on something, and then your beard hair, you get, you can't wear your gas mask properly. You can't wear your, if you're a firefighter, if you're in the Navy, that you're always on the line to fight fire. I tell you that much. And you go through every sailor goes through fire training to fight fire. Well, you have to wear a respirator if you're fighting fire. So you have to always shave your face. And these things, you come out of the military and you start a church, you're going to say shave. Well, the thing is before you wouldn't have that. If you look at pictures of Charles Spurgeon, go ahead and Google it. Stop the tape, Google it, look up Charles Spurgeon. He had a full beard. These are people that George Bell quotes. And so there's some ridiculousness that goes on when you just step back and you see some of the ridiculous things. I'm not talking about like alcohol, teetotaling, that kind of ridiculousness. I understand there are people who are against alcohol for whatever reason. I don't toe that line or anything like that. But that's not as ridiculous. Being against alcohol or smoking is not as ridiculous as being against like having long hair and a shaven face and wearing a blue shirt or why does it have to be white? That's the thing. It's like, we all didn't do that. It was just so ridiculous that it was there. The standard was there. It was literally written down in their rules for the choir, but nobody abided by that because it was so ridiculous. It's authoritarian. It fits so many pieces of the bite model. But is it the most dangerous thing in the world? Is it the most destructive cult in the world? No. There's just simply no. I've actually, there are like militias and stuff like that are a lot more dangerous. There are, it's like, you look at, like the MAGA cult, that is more dangerous. QAnon, that's more dangerous. There are much more dangerous cults, and they're more destructive. Now, are they as organized? No. That maybe some militias are more organized than QAnon. They're not organized. If they were organized, we'd have some major problems. If they were as organized as, say, Al Qaeda or ISIS or something like that, there would be major problems. But they're not. These Anchor Baptist Church is not violent, other than with children. So now you do get. There was one time I would have used violence as an adult, but luckily George Bell is not asking for violence. What he's wanting to do is build as big a church as possible, within certain boundaries. Obviously, there are certain things he will not do, which is fine. That's normal. That is normal. So there are some normalities, but there are these extra. And we didn't even get into like separation and that kind of thing, where you basically look down upon people, you look down upon your family, you look down upon people that don't go to your church, that kind of thing, other churches. It's about branding, that kind of thing. It's like one of the reasons why you wear certain clothes is because of the brand. Well, they should know that you're a fundamentalist. They should know that you go to Anchor Baptist Church, that kind of thing. So you have this branding thing, which is a cult type thing. Some of these, Nexium. Sorry, I had a little trouble with the audio, but you can see the reason why I use the word cult. It's not that large of a jump to say that Anchor Baptist Church is a cult. They're not a violent cult, for the most part, and they're not going to cause huge issues. They're not as extreme, but it is definitely a cult. They use cult mind control tactics, just like any other cult that's out there. And I was in it for a long time, and we didn't really talk about the separation issue, where they preach doctrinal separation from other people, people who they deem lower class Christians, or backslidden or something like that, or just doctrinally different. So, and there's reasons for that. There's actually doctrinal reasons, where they, George Bell himself, and IFB churches in general don't really believe in the spiritual church. There is a spiritual church where it's more than just physical. It's not just local body churches, but every single believer is every single born again Christian is part of the body of Christ. And whereas from every word that's come out of George Bell's mouth, from sitting under his preaching for I think 8 years, I've never really heard him ever talk about that, but he did talk a lot about the physical church. And there is a physical church and a spiritual church. And the fact of the matter is every single person who has gotten saved is part of the same church. There's no getting around that. No matter what other doctrinal beliefs they believe, as long as they've received Jesus Christ as their Savior, they're part of the same church. And so to look down upon people who are in the same body, that would be the left hand looking down on the right hand. But that is the one of the number one tenets of the cult, is to separate yourself from everybody else. And anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.